Look away unto Jesus and say, Lord, because you have died on that cross, I am capable of receiving everything that cross has purchased for me.
And sometimes God speaks over us and we're not willing to listen to wisdom.
All of this is available to us. There's all of this good, awesome kingdom glory. 1 Peter chapter 2. I'm excited to bring the word today. It's funny, you get used to Christianity, you get used to church, you get used to just the way we participate in the body of Christ, and you almost forget what the purpose is in bringing the word in a public forum. And the purpose is this: the word of God changes lives. The word of God, it changes hearts. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word. And so tonight, my prayer is that you would be sprinkled with the word of God, that you'd be sprinkled with a rhema, with a freshly spoken today, now word of the Lord for you. My prayer is that you would be affected, that you would be impacted, you'd be influenced by what the Lord is saying to you tonight. And it doesn't matter to me if it's directly right out of what I'm saying, or if it's a scripture I read, or if it's a testimony. It doesn't matter to me how it happens, but I'm believing, God, that you will be touched, that it will happen tonight. Amen. 1 Peter chapter 2, and we're going to pick it up in verse 18. I think I still got a little bit of feedback if you want to take my gain down. Is that the term? Verse 18. Slaves, submit yourselves to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. You know, every bit of the word, every bit of the Bible, it has a purpose. It doesn't matter that the scripture is talking about slaves. It doesn't matter that we don't have slavery in America in the 21st century. It doesn't matter that none of us in this room are going to experience slavery. That doesn't change the fact that the word of God has been placed in this Bible for a reason, and there's something to be learned from it. There's something that can speak to our spirit men and women, spirit men and women. That doesn't make any sense. I need a microphone change, I think. Yeah, that's what I'll probably do. Better? Oh, it's like heaven, isn't it? You know what heaven is when you've tasted the opposite. You know what light is when you've tasted darkness. So much better. Slaves, submit yourselves to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. For it is commendable if a man bears up under the pain of unjust suffering. It is commendable if a man bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because, key statement, because he is conscious of God. The way that you bear up under unjust punishment, unjust suffering, the way you do it is by having a consciousness of God, by being aware, by being acutely, intentionally aware of the presence of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. You know, this is talking about a situation like he starts off with slavery, but my point was that it doesn't matter if it's about slavery. The principle remains the same. He's talking about the concept of being exposed to an injustice. You've been put through the ringer. You've been unjustly treated. You've suffered for no good reason. You've been mistreated. You've been disrespected. You've been insulted. You've been beaten, persecuted, put in jail, however extreme of an example you want to make it. But the point is this: you've been somehow wronged. Or your perception is that you've been wronged. And the secret to not falling into sin in that moment is a consciousness of God. And the ultimate example, and the example that they're highlighting here in the Word, is this is what happened to Jesus. This is how Jesus lived. This is what his life was. If you look at his entire ministry, over and over again, it was the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the teachers of the law, the unbelievers, et cetera, the people from his hometown, his family members, his own townspeople. They all constantly barraged him with unjust, unfair accusation, mistreatment, disrespect, disregard, unbelief. They completely badgered him with these things, and he stepped right through it every single time, never slipping into sin, never retaliating, never responding in turn, never doing the wrong thing. He's being beaten for no reason. They've put a crown of thorns on his head. They're punching him in the head blindfolded. They're saying, "Prophesy, Son of God." They're mocking him. They're beating him. They're stripping him. They're casting lots for his clothing. They're doing the most horrible things that can be done to any human being. They hang him on the cross. He's beyond life. He's barely clinging to the last bit of life that he's got, and they're still mocking him. They're still saying, "Hey, let's see if God comes and saves him. Let's see if the angels show up and take him down from the cross. Let's see what happens." They release a murderer, a known criminal, to be free instead of Christ, and they force Pontius Pilate into crucifying Jesus for their own agenda. And so he never once slips into it. And basically what this is describing, without saying the word, it's describing offense. And offense it's a word that's actually, it's throughout the New Testament and the Old Testament. A lot of times in the modern translations, NIV, NASB, it's not translated as offense anymore. It's stumbling block, or what causes someone to sin. But the King James Version, the New King James Version, that branch of translation, it does call it offense. And what's interesting is, if you go into the Greek and you look at that definition in a Greek lexicon, offense literally means trap. It literally means snare. That's the point. It's a trap set by the enemy. It's a perceived or real injustice that you've been exposed to, and it's a trap. And the thing about traps, if it's a good trap, you don't necessarily see it as a trap going in. There's not usually like a neon sign pointing to it, say like, all right, this is Satan's trap, like here it is. Like usually if it's a well-placed trap, you don't see it until you're in it. If there's bait, there's something that will draw you in or try to attract you to it or tempt you to be pulled into its devices. There's something to try to draw you in, but it's not an obvious thing until you're in it. And so it's the consciousness of God that drives and determines whether or not you fall victim to the trap and slip into sin, or you go right through it unscathed. Jesus, it's funny to me because if you look at Jesus and you look at the account that we have of his ministry and his life, they spend very little time talking about Jesus' internal struggle against the devil. They don't really bother like showing us much of a glimpse into like Jesus having like a debate with Satan. Like you see it once in Luke chapter 4 after he's been fasting and praying for 40 days and 40 nights and he's at his weakest physical point, and Satan manifests himself to Jesus and starts tempting him wholesale. But other than that, you don't really see that much of Jesus getting internally tempted by the devil. And I think the reason why is Jesus didn't spend a lot of time playing games with it. There wasn't a lot of room for it to happen. Like he said out loud, Satan has nothing in me. And so there wasn't much wiggle room for the enemy to even have those internal debates with Jesus. There just wasn't much time for it because his consciousness of God was so high and so consistent and so thorough. Anytime Satan would try to make a move, it would get discarded. And it even says in Luke 4, like after he tried to tempt Jesus with the various things, with the food and hurling himself off the cliff and the, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world, all that stuff, it says, okay, well, Satan retreated because he needs to wait for a more opportune time. There weren't very many opportune times for Jesus to be tempted internally. That time, like after the 40 days and 40 nights of fasting, that was about it as far as what they felt significant enough to mention in the Word. What you do see is you see a pattern of Satan attacking Jesus rather through an external mechanism. And so like Peter will come up to him, and right after he gets finished revealing, yeah, I'm going to the cross and I'm going to die and it's going to be a bummer and this is rough. Peter says, "No, surely not, Lord. You're not going to die. It's not going to happen." And if you fast forward for a second and you picture Jesus in the garden the night before he dies, he's up all night praying and he's saying, "Father, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. But your will be done, not mine." And so he's not too keen on hearing his most trusted disciple and closest friend telling him, "Yeah, this isn't going to happen, Jesus. Don't worry about it. You're not going to die. You're crazy." And so he looks at Peter and he says, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are a stumbling block to me, and you have the purposes of man in mind instead of the purposes of God." And so even externally, when prompted by the devil, through his friend, through his disciple, Jesus just didn't have a whole lot of regard for that debate. He didn't. Every time the Sadducees came at him, every time the Pharisees came at him, he didn't have a whole lot of regard for that sort of debate. And it's because the consciousness of God in his life was high enough, there just wasn't there wasn't much room for it. And so I remember years ago when I was running Focus, the predecessor to Basic, our college outreach ministry at Binghamton University. We were having a meeting, and we advertised and we tabled and we had flyers and various like email, electronic, social media type invitations going out. And so we'd have random people show up that we didn't know who they were necessarily. And I remember this one meeting, there were a couple female students showed up, never seen them before, and they had Bibles. They seemed to know something about the Bible, like you could tell just the way that they were interacting in the meeting. And afterwards, they come up to me, and they present themselves as Jehovah's Witnesses. And they didn't exactly come out and say this, but what it boiled down to is they came there to witness to me and to our group, our little Bible study, essentially. And so it turned into, okay, well, let's talk about the Word. Like, we're happy to talk about the Word. And so my consciousness of God was very high. I was prepared for the meeting. I was prepared. I spent time in the presence of God. I spent time in worship. I spent time in prayer. I spent time speaking in tongues. I spent time building up my faith and bringing my spirit man up. So it's touching my thought process more. And so that conversation didn't go the way that they had hoped. It didn't go the way that they were thinking it was going to. And I remember Kevin was also helping lead the group along with Mark Rapecki at that time. And KJ looked over at me. And he's like, "Yeah, I was going to go over there and help you, but you didn't need it." Like it was like I felt like you were like Pastor Chris, like just like showing them the Word, and they just didn't know, like they didn't know how to respond. They just weren't used to talking to somebody that knew the Word and was speaking out of the Spirit like you were. And so that turned into like a series of interactions with them. And we were, I'm not saying we did it perfectly, but we were fairly wise about it, like because they were female, and we always had a group setting, and there was a couple of us from the UWC side of things. There was a couple of them from their Jehovah's Witness church, and this went on a few times. And each time it was kind of the same thing. They'd come at it the Word with some angle, and then we'd come back, and the Spirit and the truth would just kind of blast right through. And you'd see each time they were a little bit more affected by it, and it was so interesting to watch because it was simultaneously challenging them. But also, it was like they were attracted to it. Like they knew it was light. They knew it was true. They knew it was, and so like they didn't know what to do with it. And so after a little bit, they're like, "Well, why don't you come with us one day to one of our church services?" And I was like, "Sure, I'd be happy to do that, as long as you do the same and come with me one day to one of my church services." And so I go to their church service. And I bring somebody with me or whatever, and it was fine. It was their church service, and that was that. And I remember in the service, they kept on talking about the elders and like the 144,000, and they have a concept. If you're not familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, their theology, there's a concept where they're referencing the scripture out of Revelation, and there's the 144,000, and basically they take it very, very literally, and they believe that there's 144,000 chosen people sprinkled throughout history that are like part of an elite group of people that are a higher echelon of believers. And they're the only ones that go into like the true heavenly realm, and they're the only ones that have access to the full salvation. And it's this complicated doctrine. But anyways, some of these 144,000 were part of this church allegedly, and some of them were elders in the church. And it was this very reverent thing. And the way they talked, there was parts of the service that only they could participate in. There was things that only they did. And there was this very, very like high level of reverence for these people. And so that happened, and it was fine. And I noticed that, and I was like, oh, well, that's different from my normal experience in a religious setting. And so then a couple of them come to our church service, and it's the same thing as our meetings, where they just didn't really know what to do, because while it was different from what they were used to, and it challenged them because it was in conflict with what they had been taught and what they'd believed, you could tell they sensed this was true. Their spirits couldn't handle it. They couldn't ignore what was happening, and so they didn't know what to say almost. And so the next time I talked to them, they're like, yeah, the elder from our church, he wants to sit in on our next meeting, or else we're not going to meet again. And I'm like, okay, I mean, if that's what you want to do. And so they schedule this meeting, and it's at their church, and so I invite Bill to come with me because I'm not going to go there alone. And it was like, in Star Wars, you know how like in the first couple movies, the original trilogy, the real movies, you know how like they kind of like talk about the Emperor, but you don't like see him really. He's a hologram. He's referenced, and like, but you don't really see him. But they're talking about it, and you're like, wow, like it's the Emperor. He's like you can't mess with the Emperor. That's what it was. It felt like I was going to meet with the Emperor. Like it was like, this is like the king of all problems in the world, and like we're going into his domain, and like everyone's afraid of him, and everybody respects him, and everybody reveres him, and we don't know nobody's seen him, nobody's heard him, we just know he's there. And so we go into this room, and it was like we met Emperor Palpatine. We're on the Death Star, we're in the throne, and like this old guy he's all small, and he's short, and he's gray, and he doesn't look very imposing. Just like the Emperor, he shows up and he sits down, and there's just like this reverence thing going on, and like, I'm sorry that I shouldn't be making fun of this probably. So anyways, he shows up, and it's this little elderly guy, and he doesn't look physically imposing. He just looks like a regular guy. A little bit smaller. And he starts talking, and it was magnificent. I don't think, up until that point in my life, I don't think I'd ever been verbally destroyed so completely and so utter. It was like 10 to 15 minutes of just like a marathon. Like, he just ripped me apart. And he was like, you evangelical Christians and your false gospel, you think that you can come and witness to our people, and you think that if you get somebody to say some sinner's prayer, that's going to change anything. And I've been doing this for 75 years, and you're not going to tell me. And I was like, whoa. And after that, he forbid us from ever meeting with that group of people ever again. And he basically said, we're done here, you need to leave, and that was the end of it. And so Bill looks at me, like that was a paraphrase, like he went on for like 15 minutes. Yeah, like lightning bolts out of the hand, like he was electrocuting me with words. And I don't know, Bill looked at me after that, and every once in a while he'd take a breath, and I'd get to say like one thing, and there wouldn't be much he could respond to because I was completely at peace. I was completely just saying something that was true and reasonable and fair. And then he'd just go back into ripping into me. And so afterwards, we got, the meeting was over. We were asked to leave and never meet with them again. And Bill's like, wow, you're really, really good at not caring when somebody's mean to you and not responding to them accordingly. And I'm like, I don't think that it's that I'm particularly, I was conscious of God. Like I purposely I wasn't going to show up to a meeting like that without being conscious of God. And that was the secret. That is the secret. And so when you know you're walking into a trap, it's easy to do that. I knew I was walking into a trap. I knew what I was in for. I knew I was meeting with the emperor. And so I purposely made myself conscious of God, and it was fine. Like, obviously, the end result wasn't exactly what I had hoped because we were forbidden to ever meet with them again. But we produced a result in those people's lives, and whether or not we were able to see it to completion, that's not the main point. The point is we were able to do something productive. And I don't know what happened with that group of people, but my expectation is at a minimum they heard something that they'd never heard before, and they received something that they'd never heard before. And so it's not always that easy. Like I could tell you there's times that I haven't done that right, and when you don't know you're walking into a trap, that's when you're most susceptible into falling victim to it. And so like a month or two ago, we're at work, and I work right next to, Kyle and I, we sit right next to each other, we work together, and we don't have a cafeteria in our building. And so there's no easy way to get food conveniently unless you bring it in or order out. And we're all guys that don't cook, so there's pretty much nobody who's bringing food in. And so we always order out, is ultimately what ends up happening. And so one day we're ordering Chinese, and Kyle was in charge of placing the order. And so we wrote down the orders on his whiteboard, and I had to go up to a different building and meet with a customer. And so he placed the order. My meeting ran, I don't know, like 3 times as long as it was supposed to. And I was really hungry and really annoyed because the meeting was stressful. It took 3 times as long as it should have, and I hadn't eaten food all day long. So I wasn't in a great mood. And I came back down to the building. Kyle's got the order all set, and he ordered my food incorrectly. He's not even in the room. I told him that I was going to tell a story about him, but he's not even in the room. And I was not conscious of God. I was not at all. I was conscious of wanting food and being cranky about a long meeting. And so I didn't react over the top or anything, but like I gave him, like, I was a little uppity. I gave him a little attitude. I was like, who would order this instead of that? Like, I don't even understand how this could have happened. Like, why would you order that? So I figured it out. You've got God living inside of you. Even when you misstep, He's quick. The Spirit of God is quick to prompt you if you're willing to listen. And so that's another trick of the trade along the way. Like, even if you miss the immediate moment, God is faithful. He's going to provide a means for you to still come out on top. And so I was off base. I was off kilter. I was focused on food instead of God, but I still wasn't shipwrecked. So I heard quickly, like, wow, what did I just do? Like, that was sitting. I apologized to Kyle, and like he was fine. It was no big deal. And then he basically did the same thing to me like 2 weeks later. So we were even, and it all worked out. It's interesting though, that word offense, that's what destroys people's lives. That's what causes people to leave church. That's what causes people to isolate themselves. That's what causes them to fall into long-term, large-scale sin. That's what causes them to be kept from their ministry. That's what keeps them from full blessing and full purpose. There's that word offense. There's a reason why the translations have different ways of saying it, and they're all accurate. They're all accurate. Like stumbling block, something that causes you to sin. And it says in Luke chapter 17, Jesus says it right in verse 1. He's like, it's going to happen. He's like, it is a sure thing that offense is coming. It's a sure thing. In fact, let's go there because I think it's worth seeing that in black and white. It's Luke chapter 17, verse 1. Yeah, the Death Star. If you don't know Star Wars, I'm sorry, because I guess my example probably didn't make a lot of sense, but I'm sure you still got the point. Luke 17, verse 1, Jesus said to his disciples, things that cause people to sin, also in other translations, offenses or stumbling blocks, these things are bound to come. They're going to happen. It's going to happen. It's not a question. It's not a maybe. It's not well, I guess if I live my life the right way, in an ordered way, I can. No, it's going to come no matter what. It will happen. Things that cause people to sin are bound to come, but woe to that person through whom they come. And so then he condemns that person. The point there isn't, wow, I offended somebody, so now I'm condemned. His point is, look, if you have an unrepentant heart that's constantly causing major offense and destroying people's lives, that's the problem. He's not talking about a believer who inadvertently offends somebody and then repents. And in fact, that's where the Matthew 18 principle comes from. It's talking about, look, if your brother sins against you, i.e., if your brother offends you, if that happens, there's a pattern, there's a formula to follow. And if you adhere to the pattern, you're going to end up okay for sure. And the other person will probably, in all likelihood, end up okay as well. You'll be giving them every opportunity at least. And so the pattern is actually there both for your protection and the other person's protection. And the Bible says love covers a multitude of sins. If you can show your brother that they've sinned against you in love, then congratulations, you've won their heart over. And so there's this pattern is actually kind of mentioned multiple times, multiple titles, but it's the same idea. Like, if there's a sin, if there's an offense, if something happens, a transgression occurs against you, the pattern is go to your brother in love and show him. And if he hears you, you're done. And if it happens 70 times, 7 times in a day, you forgive him every single time, as long as he repents, as long as he says, "Oh man, sorry about that. I can't believe I did that again." If he doesn't hear you, you're not done. Then you move to step 2. Step 2 is, okay, try again, but with somebody that's in your inner circle that you trust, not a new Christian, not somebody who's in an inappropriate, improper channel or avenue, but somebody who's of reasonable standing in your life with a level of counsel and authority or respect that you have. Go with that person and try to, once again in love, show the brother where things got messed up. If they still don't hear you, you're not done. Then you go with the church, and that's a more complicated thing, but certainly that's a pastoral leadership thing. It's not like let's get 200 people in an intervention and just start like throwing eggs at them or something. Like, it doesn't literally mean the entire church, but that's people think crazy things, so I try to clarify. Yeah. So, anyways, the point I've made up until now is offense is going to come. It's going to happen, and it's a trap. It's a snare, and it's not something that's always obvious. In fact, when Satan's on his A game, he's going to make it so it's not obvious, and you're not going to realize it until you're in the moment. And I want to go to Romans chapter 10. It's going to look like I'm totally shifting gears, but it's actually related. Now remember, consciousness of God, that is the solution to the offense problem. That's the solution to the stumbling block problem. That's the solution to the what causes one to sin problem. Consciousness of God. Romans chapter 10, it's talking about the righteous. Verse 6 is talking about the righteousness that is by faith. Skimming down to verse 8, the word is near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith we are proclaiming. And so we're talking about righteousness by faith. We're talking about the word of God by faith. Verse 9, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you confess and are saved. I'm taking us here and highlighting the scripture because this is the pattern of faith. This is the process by which faith operates. There's a formula. There's actually a defined formula with how faith is going to work every time. It's not that faith is a formula. I'm saying there's a process of performing in faith. And that process, it starts with belief in your heart, and it ends with confession out of your mouth. There's always belief in your heart, and there's always external activity coming out of that belief in your heart. Every single time. And once again, the same idea. You can read the same exact concept in James chapter 2. It says, faith without works is no faith at all. It's dead. You need to have the belief plus the works, plus the activity. You could read it again in Romans 4 where it talks about Abraham, the father of faith. It says, against all hope, in hope, Abraham believed in his heart, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And he confessed out loud, I will be the father of many nations. It will happen. Doesn't matter that I'm 100 years old and my body is as good as dead. Doesn't matter that my wife is barren and is far too old to bear a child. Doesn't matter. I believe in my heart and I confess. You could see it again in Hebrews chapter 12, or chapter 11, the hall of faith, they call it. You could say each time, it starts off, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. So faith is always about believing in your heart something God has said, but you cannot presently see. It's always that. It's always something God has said, but you can't currently see it. It's not currently manifested. And so then it takes you through the pattern throughout the Bible, and it shows these heroes of the Old Testament doing faith things. And there's always this belief in the promise of God that they can't yet see, and then them taking action based off of what they believe in their heart. And so the reason why I'm showing you this is because the consciousness of God is highly related to being able to move in faith. The two are very intertwined. They're very related. It says later in this chapter, in fact, that faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word. The word for word there is rhema, and rhema means freshly spoken word of God. It means something that God's just spoken to me right now. I'm not relying on something that I wrote down from 5 years ago. I'm not relying on just a biblical recitation. I'm not relying on anything except the now voice of God in my life. And in order to have that, there has to be a consciousness of God. It also, what's interesting too, this is where we fail a lot, and it's hard to see it in the moment. But here's where we fail a lot when we think we're moving in faith and it doesn't work. It says in verse 9, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart, not in your head. There's a difference between believing in your heart and believing in your head. Verse 10, for it is with your heart that you believe and are justified. It's not with your head. It's not a mental persuasion. The knowledge of God in your brain is helpful. It's a big advantage, but it's not the same thing as believing something in your heart. And what does it mean to believe in your heart? It's an abstract concept, so it's hard to put in exact words, but what does the heart mean? Like it literally in the Greek here, the word is cardia, and it's talking about, it can literally mean your physical heart, but it's the same thing as what we have in English, where the word heart has a double meaning, where it's a physical thing in your body, but there's a reflective meaning for the center of your being. And so your heart in your body is this central, vital, deeply seated thing. And if there's something wrong with your heart, you're probably in trouble. Same concept in your soul realm. It's this deep-seated thing, center part of you, that if there's a problem in your heart, you're probably in trouble. And what's interesting too, your heart, your brain gets stimulated by knowledge. Your heart gets stimulated by relationship. That's very important. The way you stimulate your heart unto belief is relationally. It's relationally. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing comes by the word. That word has got to be freshly spoken. That's only happening when there's a relational activity. It's only happening when there's a relational activity. Now, simultaneously, I'm sure there's something happening in your brain. That's typically how it happens. But it's your relational activity with the Lord that causes that belief in your heart to occur. That's where faith comes from. The persuasion in your brain is insufficient. The persuasion in your brain is a starting point. It's an advantage, but it's not the end. It's not what actually allows you to walk in faith. And so the point of me trying to bridge it back to the whole offense thing, if you're staying conscious of God, that means you're staying in close fellowship with him. You're staying in a close relationship with him, which therefore means that now you're instilling a regular stimulus of belief in your heart. And now it's easy to operate in faith. It's easy to flow out of what God's given you. Like I said, when I knew I was walking into the trap, it was really easy to purposely, relationally interact with my Father before I went into the trap. It's harder to do that when you don't realize you're walking into it. And the only real solution is having a regular, consistent, robust routine where you're constantly fellowshipping with the Lord. That's the only, and like I said too, don't get beat up. Don't feel too bad if you miss the mark for a moment, because God is going to swoop in and he's going to give you an opportunity to rectify it, to fix it. He's going to give you that chance. But yeah, I'm gonna turn it back over to PC in a minute here. Quick clarifying point, because I am a teacher, so I said something weird when I was getting distracted by the feedback. Spirit doesn't have gender, obviously. There's neither male nor female in Christ. I know that probably nobody took that away the wrong way, but I want to be accurate. So, for the record, yeah.